So I want to jump in at '04, and I don't know where that necessarily falls in that linear existence of the West Coast Express, but it was clear that this is one of the top lines in the NHL. The Flames had that breakout Cinderella year. Daryl's first year as head coach. They find Mika Kiprasov, but they were still going to be huge underdogs against the Canucks. You had noted before we got on the air and we were setting this up, Rhett had some tie-ins to the story along the line even before '04. But I just recall thinking, like, what a break it was for the Flames that the Todd Bertuzzi incident happened when it did, and that maybe when we look back on '04, we don't really remember that as much as we should have. It was not a fully, well-rested, healthy, all-available Vancouver Canucks group that they faced in that incredibly dramatic opening round.
No, and you're talking about one of the most dominant players in the league at that time. And we all know the incident that rendered him suspended for the rest of that season and ultimately the lockout season as well. But it was a different team. And the other part is that incident happened the day before the trade deadline. So they had to
Oh,
scramble and try to bring guys in. And they got Marty Ruchinski and Jeff Sanderson. They brought a few guys in to see if they could patch the holes. And they were still a good team and they still thought they could make a run. But as you guys know in that series, it was such an epic first round series. Rhett was actually the guy, I think, that drew the penalty on Jovanovski that put him in the penalty box at the very end. And people will remember the shot of Jovo pounding on the glass after Matt Cook scored that tying goal with barely any time on the clock.
yes.
And then he was still in the penalty box in overtime when Marty Jelena got the winner. But you're right, they weren't fully healthy. They lost two goalies during that round as well. But that's the playoffs, and that's how she breaks.
And it's funny
Yeah,
you mentioned it coming
go
in
ahead,
that.
Dean, sorry.
Sorry, right? I was going to say because I wanted to look back and remember that trade as to how Todd Bertuzzi became a Vancouver Canuck. You'll see sometimes, and it's not the same level, but Gretzky, Curry, those guys drafted by the Oilers, a lot of time that's homegrown talent. They've played together in the American League and they've come up together or whatever. They were all just brought into place. Everyone remembers Alex Stoyanov, right? What a terrible deal that was. Great for Vancouver as Naslund comes in. Brendan Morrison, New Jersey Devil. We've heard the Berkey story. He needed to get out, or if you don't want to play, that whole thing at the end of his career. But you wonder sometimes, you hear a lot about chemistry and how it comes to be. You think in the end it's just natural. You put those three together. But those three guys would have played on separate lines for a while over the course of putting this together. And from your own memory banks, how did that all start to work? Was it kind of an instant thing for those three guys, or did it take a little bit of time for that West Coast Express to become a thing?
It took quite a while. Marcus Naslund came in from Pittsburgh, as you mentioned. Great deal, arguably the best in the history of the Vancouver Canucks for Alex Stoyanov. And he was coming off a Penguins team that had Lemieux and Yager, and it should work there for a skilled player, but it hadn't. He came in, and it wasn't instant for Marcus Naslund either. He wasn't sure where he fit in the Canucks organization, and at one point almost asked out. And Berkey stopped him and said, "Don't say what I think you're going to say, because if you ask to be traded, I'm going to trade you. So don't say it. We're going to keep you for a while and get back out there and get to work," is the Coles notes on that. Berkey tells it a lot better than I do. Then Todd Bertuzzi comes in. It's the Trevor Linden deal. Like, big pressure for him coming in, but he was just so relieved to be in a different place where they weren't expecting him to be Clark Gillies. Like, that's who they thought he was going to be. Mike Milbury wanted him to be Clark Gillies and run roughshod over people all the time. And he wanted to be more of a skill guy and use his size when he chose to use it. And so he comes in, he starts playing on a line with Messier. It's going pretty well, but then he gets a couple of injuries. And by the time he kind of gets back and gets going, well, Messier's on his way out. He's figuring things out. They get a little chemistry with Naslund. They're playing with another former Flame when they bring him in, Andrew Castles. So they bring Castles in, underrated centerman for sure. They've got great chemistry. But all of a sudden, Mark Crawford decides to put Brendan Morrison in there in his second season with the Canucks. And it was basically just to give the line a different look. And what they found is it had more speed all of a sudden. Castles was very good, but he wasn't fleet of foot. Awesome passer, but Brendan could get back, do the defensive work, and he could get up in the rush. And so that unlocked the rush game of the West Coast Express. They could create more skating than they could have, more of that half-court offense, if you will, with Andrew Castles.